there's this claim that is made by this scientist turned seer turned, I think, monumental or history-altering theologian Emanuel Swedenborg, whose work we explore on this show, that the Bible, the way you sort out this whole Bible thing, like why does it seem to contradict science at times? Why does it seem to portray a God that is vengeful and doesn't quite have the moral characteristics that you would want to teach to your children? What's going on, and what about all the strange stuff that doesn't make sense? He squares that circle. He squares that circle by saying that the whole thing is written in this ancient symbolic language.
It's such a relief to me when he says that, because not only does the Bible contradict science, it very strongly contradicts itself in a number of places,
right.
Or what Swedenborg calls seeming contradictions, because on the surface of it, 1 minute, God is angry, and the next minute he's saying, I love you forever, but if you ever do that again.
When I first got onto YouTube, there was a bunch of videos. It was the height of new atheism, and there's a bunch of videos I remember one that was the Bible Contradictions game show, and it just showed, is God all loving or all vengeful?
And you got lots of evidence on both sides, I imagine.
Yeah, and there was so many contradictions that what's going on with that? The Bible is symbolic. Some people will say, well, Swedenborg is making that up. It's not actually symbolic. Actually, the Bible itself talks about being symbolic. Before we even get into how to read and decode the secret ancient language of correspondences, the universal language of correspondences, don't take our word for it. Okay, let me hit you with a couple of
and don't take Swedenborg's word for it. You know, I mean, you don't even need Swedenborg. This really is in the book, isn't it?
Okay, so here you go, Matthew 13. All these things Jesus spoke to the multitude in parables, and without a parable he did not speak to them.
Yeah, and these parables, as the viewers will know, were these stories that Jesus would tell. So people would come up to him and say, why are you doing this? And he'd say, well, there was a farmer one time, and he did this,
yes,
and he
that's
did
right.
that. And eventually sometimes they figure out, was that a story about us? Are we bad?
Yeah.
But he didn't. That's the way he would couch it. And then it says, that's the whole thing is like that.
Because everybody knows he speaks in parables. However, other times he does not talk in parables, but here it says without a parable, he didn't speak to them.
Yeah.
Then in John, these things I have spoken to you in figurative language, but the time is coming when I will no longer speak to you in figurative language, but will tell you plainly about the Father.
Yeah. So he's saying, I am not being direct with you right now,
When you think he is, don't we get our concept of the Father from what he's saying?
Yeah.
Isn't he being clear? But here he's indicating, no, man, I ain't even started yet.
And there's a time going to come later, which is very interesting, Does that have anything to do with Swedenborg,
Could well be. Then this is from Luke, so we're hitting all the Gospels. It's not just one of the writers indicating this. To you it's been given to know the mysteries of God's kingdom, but to the rest in parables, so that seeing they would not see, and hearing they would not hear.
Oh, there's a little clue, isn't it? Like
So
there's some reason why there would actually be a downside to clarity, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't unpack it, but he's hinting that there's some downside. If this was all just absolutely plain, something bad would happen.
2 Corinthians 3. Our competence is from God, who has made us competent to be ministers of a new covenant, not of letter, but of spirit. For the letter kills, but the spirit gives life.
Pretty clear teaching about there being two layers to the Bible.
Right.
And the outside one called the letter, and the inside one called the spirit. Yeah.
This one,
and what a shocking thing to say about the literal text, to say it kills. Well, that's pretty strong.
Come on, man, that's disrespectful. This, I think, is the smoking gun, though. This next one.
You got a better one than
this?
This
is from the Old Testament. This is from the book of Psalms, Psalm 78, 1-2. It says, "Give ear, my people, to my teaching. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of old." So here comes a parable. Do you know what it says next? That goes on to tell the story of the Israelites being freed from slavery in Egypt.
Which is a story that's universally taken literally. I
As
mean,
a
yes,
history.
They were people
This is not a parable, it's
they
a history.
traveled here, they camped there, they went here. Yeah.
So,
Dark sayings of old.
yeah,
parables.
this is a story, regardless of whether it actually took place. This
Yes,
is intended to teach you something. There's a hidden
Yeah.
meaning within that.
Yeah. That's an interesting twist, because what Jesus says in the New Testament are parables that it seems like he just makes up on the spot. You know, a person
Right.
did this, and there was a king who went to a faraway country, and,
Yep.
or whatever. But that is using the word parable of narrative stories that fill books after books in the Hebrew Scriptures,
Yeah.
the Old Testament.
Also, the walk to Emmaus, where Jesus opens the Scriptures about himself, which most of the Bible is not about Jesus. So how can he open those
On the
Scriptures?
face of it, yeah, and yet it says in the Psalms and in Moses and the prophets and everything.
So the idea that the Bible is cryptic, or the Bible is symbolic, or the Bible is correspondential, can get some people feeling like, well, why? Why would you do that, God? If you did it, why would you do that? We get a lot of comments about this. This one in particular is,
Okay.
why offer up so many opportunities to misinterpret the Bible,
Yes.
to misguide and contort to the exact opposite of the intended message? Was it too tall of an order to expect mortals to decipher the true meaning of arguably cryptic messages?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the person making the comment was sort of is this a bit of an insult, like
Yeah.
you can't handle the truth, as they say? you
Right,
know?
right. So the answers we're going to give, I think there's 3 headline answers.
Okay.
Which one is that it used to not be cryptic. The Bible
that
used
is-
to not, when it was written, nobody was said, why are you doing this cryptic stuff?
That is wild. What a
2,
wild thing to say.
it is that way for the protection of the internal sense, the spirit that's within the Bible. And 3, it has more functions than us just understanding it. So even if you can't understand it, it can still do good
But
things.
we're the center of the universe. Isn't it all about our understanding?
All right, so let's get into it. The first is that this used to be something that was a lot less cryptic than it is now, because the language of correspondences that Swedenborg says the Bible is written in is a lost divine language that humanity used to know. That used to be the lingua franca. That was what everybody did stuff
That's
in.
how they communicated. It's suddenly reminding me of things like Cockney slang, that rhyming slang. They said that people I think it was within the sound of Big Ben, the clock in London, England, that they would speak this rhyming. So instead of saying stairs, they would say apples and pears. They would substitute all these words, and you just had to know, oh yeah, you mean stairs.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think that it's like the when they discovered the Rosetta Stone. Right? So they had Egyptian hieroglyphics, right? And Egyptian hieroglyphics, if you're not familiar, they look like some pictures
Absolutely.
that a kid drew.
Right.
Look, I have terrible handwriting. I'm not critiquing. It's hard to etch those things in stone, but it's not like they're 3D shaded. These are just line drawing,
Right. Simple figures.
little
right.
pictures, and they would be a big series of pictures. And nobody would say when they saw those, why did they just write squiggly line, eyeball, cat? What do they mean? They know, this means something. We can't read this. We have to
Yes.
decode this because there's something in there.
Yeah.
Rosetta Stone comes
Right.
along, and finally, you get it. You can understand and unlock the meaning in there.
Because it had 3, I don't remember which ones, but it had 3 different languages, right? So it was enough text to be able to see,
Okay.
the
That's what
language
they
we
mean.
do know
Right.
gave us a clue to what the language we don't know was.
Swedenborg, in some ways, is a Rosetta Stone. It is saying, look, this is something that everyone used to know how to read hieroglyphics. You didn't need that stone for it.
Yeah,
Everyone
right.
used to read correspondences. So back when the Bible was, especially the Old Testament was around, everyone would assume you're reading it in this form. Like that's, of course, this is how we write it. That's what that is. But now we look at it and we're like, wait, Was the world created in 6 days? So this is what Swedenborg says about it in his book Sacred Scripture. Absolutely everything in the physical world corresponds to something spiritual, as does absolutely everything in the human body. However, the nature of this correspondence has been unknown until the present time, even though it was common knowledge in ancient times. For the people who lived in those times, the knowledge of how things correspond to each other was the very essence of knowledge. This knowledge was so universal that it governed the writing of all their scrolls and books.
Which to me is an astonishing statement, because if you look at I don't know anything about what I'm talking about, but the Rig Veda, and you look at the Iliad and the Odyssey, and he's basically saying all that ancient literature was written in correspondences, and everybody understood. Oh yeah, you're not saying that literally 9 women inspire all the different arts. That's metaphorical, right? The muses, and or whatever.
And but that to contemporary readers, they would have got that, and they would have known how to approach it. I know that you head up a translation project called the New Century Edition, where you're translating Swedenborg's books, because he wrote them in Latin, and you're trying to take that Latin and put it into modern day English. And I know that you've used, there's a vault that has a recreation of Swedenborg's library in it.
Yes.
And you've used that when you're translating, and the reason is because you need to know what he knew so that you would understand idioms and references and things in his works that we may not have contemporarily anymore, right? You don't know the culture he was in. You're not going to know what he meant when he said these things. Yeah.
He'll say things like wrapping spices in paper, or that there's a certain eye disease, that he'll give it some name, but we don't really know what that was. And it's very helpful to be able to go back and see the context, because all language happens in a context. I mean, you're trying to communicate something, right? I mean, yes, there's lying or trying to fool people or tell jokes or something like that. Most communications you're trying to do something. You're trying to plant some thought in the other person's head.
Right. Well, here right now we're trying to. Hey, don't you think this could be interesting and worth looking into? We're trying to make it clear so that you might understand it, or get a little closer. I mean, so that we might understand it. This is Sacred Scripture 21. I have been taught that the people of the earliest church, the one that existed before the flood, were so heavenly in nature that they talked with angels of heaven, and that they were able to talk with them in correspondences. This meant that their wisdom developed to the point that when they saw anything on earth, they not only thought of it in earthly terms, but thought of it in spiritual terms at the same time, and therefore their thoughts joined those of angels.
I love how different that is than the idea of sort of club wielding Neanderthals or something,
Yeah, right.
It's which I don't think they were doing anyway, but the idea that they possessed a level of wisdom and connection with the spiritual world, for one thing, might explain why they survived so well, like they were getting some help.
Right. Well, if we're saying the Bible's written in this sacred language, where does the language come from? It's the language that they speak in heaven.
Yeah.
I think Swedenborg argues that it's the language that your dreams speak in.
Yep. That's right.
It's really the language of God. So the people, when people used to have a closer, open connection with heaven and with God, you learned that language.
And this is controversial, no doubt, but I would even argue that today, really, engaging bodies of literature like Lord of the Rings for a certain age group, or Harry Potter, or something, things that really capture your imagination, are they devoid of correspondence? There's something in there,
Yes.
The idea that Gandalf the Grey goes down, they think he's dead, and then he comes back as Gandalf the White,
Right.
So I've always, or that the goblin language in Lord of the Rings is just revolting to listen to,
Yeah.
There's correspondence.
I've always thought that you've got a bunch of people making art, you've got a bunch of people making movies, and trying to sell stories that will catch on in the imagination, like, as you said, a Harry Potter or a Lord of the Rings or a Star Wars will. And people are constantly trying to do that. Certain ones catch on, and I think it's because they touch on these deep truths, that they get the symbols right. And when it does that, it resonates in your heart and makes you feel something because it's speaking deeply to you. And that's why people like, oh, I like this movie. That one is not that memorable, but people want to pour over and over this mythology of these things because it's actually connected to this truth that's in heaven.
And Swedenborg might even go so far as to say he wouldn't have, because they didn't have movies per se back when he was alive, but that your angels are watching with you, and there are certain shows that they get excited about, and you feel it as your own excitement, you know. But this is a great story, you know, because it connects in some way with the life of the Lord in the world, or something like that, you know.
So this is Sacred Scripture 3. The style of the word is the divine style itself, and no other style, however sublime and excellent it may appear to be, can be compared with it. It would be like comparing darkness to light. It is characteristic of the word's style that there is something holy in every statement, and even in every word, even at times in the letters themselves. So the word unites us to the Lord and opens heaven.
Okay, well, that's an interesting function. Not too many other things do exactly that. You know, that's a pretty specific function. If you're talking about different reasons for something to be the way that it is, that's and amazing to say that that's the divine style itself. And yet, a compelling argument along those lines would be that when Jesus comes into the world, lo and behold, that's how he communicates. He does the, you know, he's reading the Hebrew Scriptures, and then he's coming up with new stories that are in that same, because he speaks the language, you know, he knows how you do that. And so even sometimes people will ask him point blank about things, and he'll tell them a story instead of giving them a direct answer.
Yeah. So the style of the word. So you open up the Bible, and it doesn't necessarily read like War and Peace.